Okay, so we're going to start now in Moed Katan, and this is on Daf Chof Hey Amud Beis 25b. And the Gemara talks about there were two great rabbis who are in. They brought him up to Israel to bury, and they lived in Babel in Babylonia, and they brought him in there, and there were the camels were waiting one for another in order who should go first. But in any event, here we talk about the eulogy that took place after they came to the place over the after they came to Babel. So Pasach Alehahu Yinuka. So there was a Yinuka. Yinuka is usually a reference to a child who was a young, but somebody who was very brilliant or very learned. So he eulogized, he opened up and he eulogized, and he talked about these two rabbis. He says, Geza Yishishim Olo Mibavel, a root of elders have come up to Israel from Babylonia, from Babel. Geza Yishishim Olo Mibavel. V'imoy Sefer Milchamis. And he brought along with him a book of Milchamis, of war. What is he talking about when he says, now, right now, we were saying that a root of elders, he was basically referring to both of the rabbis. They were called Yishishim, the elders. They came out from Bavel. And with him, there was it's a singular language, but with him, he says there was a book of war. What is the book of war that he brought along? Dr. Rashi, Sefer Muhammad, Rashi gives three interpretations. One interpretation means a Sefer Torah. He brought along a Sefer Torah, meaning the rabbi who was all immersed in the Torah is called, he's like a Sefer Torah, because we actually learned earlier in the Gemara that one of the rabbis, when he died, they wanted to put down a Sefer Torah next to him, sort of to say that this person learned the Torah. So a rabbi who is learned is called like a Sefer Torah. In another Gemara, it says people didn't stand up for the rabbi. So he says how foolish they stand up for a Sefer Torah, but they don't stand up for the rabbi who studies the Torah, the rabbi. So I think that's Sefer Muhammad. And why is it called? They called it. It's war against the Yetzer Hara. It's war and battles against the world. That's the Torah because it's the Torah view. Uh, that's one interpretation. Another interpretation is because as they approached here, there was a little battle going on over there between who should go first. And that Arab merchant who suggested where to go, he was the one that ended up losing out. His cheeks were taken out because he shamed Rabbi Hamnuna. He said the other one should go first. But in either event, so he says the other lotion is Shel Nilcham Rabba v'Rab Hamnuna, Rabba Bar Huna, and Rab Hamnuna, which was the other one, the two rabbis, they were battling, and that's the war. V'notur kochi dahutaya, and the cheeks of that merchant sort of expired. Then we have Lishnachrina, yet another lashon, that these are actually two separate the two rabbis. One is hinted by Geza Yeshishim. He's a root of the elders. Lishnachrina, the other language is Geza Yeshishim. The Geza Yeshishim ze Rabba Barabhuna. That refers to Rabba Barabhuna. He's called a root of elders. Why? So he says, Duhu ben Gedolim. He was a son of the great. His father, which was Rabba Barhuna, ben Rabhuna. He was the son of Rabhuna. Duhu Reish Goyla. He was the head of the exile of Rabhuna. He had a very high position. And he was the son of him, and he's called Yeshishim Odiv Minosi Eretz Yisrael. So he's actually greater even than a leader of Eretz Yisrael. He brought along with him the Imoy Sefer Melchames Imoy. That's Rabbi Hamnuna. The Sefer of war with him, Rabbi Hamnuna. I'm not sure why he calls Rabbi Hamnuna Sefer Melchames. Maybe also because still Sefer Torah. It doesn't say, it's not so clear in Rashi, we've got to look up in the Mefarshim, but in this context, in the third interpretation of Rashi, that statement is divided into two. Geza Yeshishim Olam Mebabel references Rabba Bar Ravhuna, Ben Ravhuna, and he's called Yeshishim because his father wasn't important. He was the head of the exile. And Imay Sefer Milchames, that would be Rav Hamnuna. Further, what did he say in his eulogy? He said, Kos v'kopud huchpulu. The word kos, it's almost like chaos. Kos v'kipud, those are languages of curses. They were doubled, kos v'kipud, because unfortunately two of the rabbis, they were burying them together. So he says, kos v'kipud, the curses, huchpulu, were doubled with two rabbis here that died. Rashi says, "Cause v'kiput huchpelu klolo." Because that means a curse. Kimoi, and Rashi brings an example. The Reshuha cause v'kiput, and the curse will inherit it, which is in Yeshaya Perik Lamadalad. Koloimer, to say. So what he was saying over here is klolo ba'a. A curse came, cause v'kiput, v'huchpala ba'olam. So cause v'kiput huchpalu, and they were doubled because you had a double trouble. Lirais b'shoid v'shever habo b'shiner. This double trouble was to see the robbed and the broken that comes from shinar. Shinar is bubble. That was Hashem robbed, basically, robbed the people of Bavel, of Shinar, and they were broken. They came here from Shinar because they were taken away from there. Lirois shoyd v'shaver, zokt Rashi, zeh shekotzav HaKadosh Baruch Hu al Elomei. This, that God was angry at the world, so they came to see Hashem's anger on the world that's coming from Shinar. He says, he teaches now, Rashi says it, Kotzav al Elome. So this means the Eibishter got angry, the Chomos mimenu nefoshes, and he robbed souls from it. Meaning Hashem took away the souls of these great tzaddikim. That was sort of the anger of Hashem. But he says, "V'someach bohem pikalo chadosha." God is rejoicing with these tzaddikim like a new kala. When a person is marrying a new kala, all fresh, all new, these rabbis, even though they went through their whole world, they were not tainted and they were not blemished by any of the world. They were returned to Hashem like a new kala to Hashem. And the Rechav Aroves, the one who rides one of the skies, is called Aroves of the seven skies. Hashem that writes Sos v'Sameach, he is happy and rejoicing. V'voy elov nefesh noki v'tzadik, when the soul of somebody pure and a tzaddik comes to him. So this is the words that he said, that this was Hashem robbed them and punished them, and they came from Babel. But Hashem is happy with them like a new kala because they were totally went through this world without any blemishes. And that's therefore a clean soul, a clean tzaddik. The Gemara gives another eulogy that was done for Ravina. Says the Gemara, Kinoch Nafshei, the Ravina, when the Ravina passed away, Posach Aloi Haus Avdano. So there was a eulogizer that started off the eulogy. And he says, Tumorim Hiniu Roish, the dates have raised their head, moved their heads. Al Tzadik Katomer, or a tzaddik who is like a date. Usually we find tzaddik katomor yifrach, a tzaddik like the date will blossom. And there is a comparison that a tomor has just leiv echod, it has one heart, maybe because the date has just one pit, but tzaddikim are compared to a tomor. So therefore he said, let the tomorim raise their heads. And he says, Nosim leilis kayomim, will take days, nights like days, will keep on eulogizing these people day and night, or night and day. Al mesim leilis kayomim, because they were the ones that put nights like days. They always studied whether it was nighttime or daytime. So we should eulogize them by day and by night. So Rashi, Nosim Leilis Kayomin. Let's put Leilis Kayomim, says Rashi. Behesped, that's in eulogy. We should mourn them days and nights. And Al Shesom Leilis Kayomim Batera. Because Ravina, he took nights as days to study Torah, so that's why we should eulogize them as well. So now the Gemara says there were two people, they were eulogizers, they were like knew how to do it. So one of them was named Bar Kipuk and one of them was Bar Ovid. So the Gemara Omer le Rab Ashi le Bar Kipuk. So Rab Ashi says to Bar Kipuk, as Rashi says, Bar Kipuk or Bar Ovid Havi Savdoni, they were eulogizers. And they said, he asked, Rab Ashi asked to Bar Kipuk, he says, Ahu yoima mai amrit, on the day that I pass, what are you going to say? Well, how are you going to eulogize me? He wanted to hear the eulogy that he's going to say for him. He says, on that day, what are you going to say? Amar lei. So he said, what I'm going to say, he said like this, Amina, what I'll say is, Im ba'rozim noflo shal helves, ma yasu ezoy, which literally translates that if the fire has fallen upon the cedars, cedar is a huge big tree, but the fire has consumed them. I mean, this is a metaphor for Rav Ashi, who was like a cedar. He was a great tzaddik, and yet he fell. So what can the moss of the wall do? I mean, how could they, what kind of a defense do they have? They're going to die for sure. It doesn't withstand. Even the greatest of rabbis also ends up. And then he gives another metaphor. He says, Liviosun bechike huolo mayasu the geirekak. Liviosun, that's the Leviathan. And bechike huolo means he was with a hook, a fish hook. he was brought up. Meaning even the Leviathan, who's the strongest, the biggest, was also hooked in. So Mayasu the Geirikak. So what are the fish of puddles, who are small fish? What are they gonna do? In other words, they're gonna for sure be hooked. Basically, the same idea. Nobody escapes death. Even the big Leviathans, they too get stuck over there. He gives him another marshal. He says, "B'nachal sheitif nachfla chika." Even there is a valley that flows. The chika has fallen there, which means it captures. Yasu May gave him. What should you? Yasu May gave him. What are these still waters going to do? In other words, even the flowing waters. Again, it's all metaphors for the great tzaddikim who get caught up. Death gets them also. So what did the May gave him? What are the still waters going to do? So this was the one of the eulogizer. The other eulogizer didn't like it. Amar le bar Ovin. So bar Ovin says, Chaz v'shalom. God forbid, the chika v'shalheves b'tzadika amino. I would say, I guess he asked the bar Ovin too. Bar Kopek said the fairy, but he asked bar Ovin the next one. He says, God forbid, I wouldn't use a hook or a flame by tzaddikim. I wouldn't say that. So he says, Umay Amret, what would you say? He says, Amino, I would say, the Chula Avelim. Cry for the mourners. Those people, but Veloy La Aveda. But not for the loss, don't cry for them. Shehili Menucha Va'anu Lanocha. Because the loss is going to rest. He's in a good place. We are the ones that are sighing, but he's okay. He's not a problem. Weep for the mourners, not for the loss, for it has found rest while we remain in sorrow. The mourner, he's at rest, but we're in sorrow. So he wasn't too happy, Rabashi, on both of them, because the first one compared it to a fire, and the other one said because of something that was lost. He calls the rabbi, calls Rabashi a lost, something that was lost. So his mind, Cholish Daitayu, Alayu on them, he felt bad for them. In other words, he was upset at them. So the Gemara, Cholash Datayu, so the Gemara, why? What does it mean, Cholash Datayu? The High Medamale L'Shalheves, the High Laveda, and this one is comparing it to a lost object. But because he was upset with them, is Hapach Karayu, their legs twisted. They were punished. And the Gemara says, Hahu Yoima, but on that day when he actually died, they did not come to eulogize him. So Trashi, why? Because they were punished. Vahu Yoima de Noch Nafshe. So Taka, on that day that he died, Loisabduo, they did not eulogize him. Mishum, the Irilahu Takola Al Yode, because they were punished through him, so they didn't want to eulogize him, I guess. They didn't want to, because he caused them to punish. But he says, Bahainu the Omar Rabashi. And this is a statement what Rabashi said. Loi bar kipuk cholitz v'loi bar ovin cholitz. The interesting thing is the din of chalitza that if your brother dies without children, then you have to take his wife, your wife's brother. That's but in or you yibum or do chalitza. But you only do chalitza uh, if a person has a straight foot, because it says that she shall remove his shoe from on his foot and not underneath his foot. If his foot twisted, that comes out that it's under the foot. That's not on the foot. And he says, therefore, that not bar kipuk will do chalitza, not bar oven did chalitza, because their legs was twisted and they could not, therefore they wouldn't do chalitza. Loy bar kipuk, v'loy bar oven chalitza, Rashi, mishum, the ishapchu kra'ayu, because their feet were turned around.
Meaning that they had to do Yibum.
And we learned in Yevomes, the Gemara says, Haiman de masgi aluchsa de riglo. I'm actually thinking that maybe his hapuch karayu means they lost their legs and they didn't have the actual legs. But over there, it's because it says over there, a person who walks aluchsa de riglo on the board of a foot, like a make-believe foot, what do they call it? The prostatic foot. You walk on a loicholis. That Torah Omra v'cholza nalim al ragli. The Torah says, remove the shoe from his foot, v'loy metachas raglo, but not underneath his foot, which would mean even under something else. It has to be directly under the foot. So whatever. So they were punished because that's the way they eulogized. The Gemara says, Rova kava osili diglas, and that's the river Chidekel. Diglas is Chidekel that we learn in the beginning of in Chumash. It talks about the various different rivers. So one of them was Chidekel. So when Rava came to Diglas, Omerle le Barovin, he would say to Barovin, Kum eimon milsa, come and say something, so that when I passed through there, it was kind of a danger to make sure yourself. He says, go ahead and say a prayer for me, how to go through. Maybe this was before the incident that he punished him, but he told Barovin, say something. Or this was not Rabashi, this was Rava. So could be it's because different person. Koiva Omar. So he got up and he said as follows. Bo'u roiv shlishis b'mayim. The majority of the shlishis of the third came into the water. What does it mean, shlishis? So he says, Yisrael nikru shlishis. The Yidden are called shlishis. We find in the Gemara, I think that's what it means. We find the Gemara that the Yidden are called Amot Liso in the Gemara in Shabbos because they have Kohanim, Levim, and Yisraelim, so they're called a Shlishis, meaning that they're a nation of three. So Rosh Shlishis is referencing Rava, who was very important. So he says Rosh Shlishis meaning Yisrael Nikroim Shlishis. The Yidden are called Shlishis. I think that's what they're called Shlishis. Rava Shakul Kerev Yisrael, and Rava is equal like the majority of the people. So he's called Rosh Shlishis, like the most of the Yidden. And he says they came by Mayim, they're in the water. What did he tell him to say something? He says, ask mercy so that we shouldn't drown. So this is what he was saying. The majority of the Shlishi entered in the water. remember and have compassion. We have lost our way from following you, just like a woman loses her way from her husband. But don't let go of us. Like the sign in the bitter drinking, which is referencing, Rashi says, a woman who was a soita is checked, in those. So don't neglect us like the sign of the Meimora. And if she drinks it, then she dies. We're asking the Eibishter, even though we have strayed away from Hashem as a woman strayed from her husband, but yet we're asking Hashem to help us and not to let us go and not deal with us in the same kind of a way. Okay, now the Gemara is going to talk about various different other eulogies. Chanan, we talk about Chanin, one person. Then we talk about Yechanan. We talk about Zera. We talk about Abba, Rababa. We talk about Yaakov. And we talk about Yossi. We talk about Shmuel. We talk about Chia. And we talk about Menachem. So that's the simon here, just to know the names. Chonon, Yechon, Zera, Abba, Yaakov, Yossi, Shmuel, Chia. No. So the Gemara starts off with Chonin. Rabbi Chonin was Chasna de Bei Nisia. Abba. He was the son-in-law of the head of the leader of the exile. He had no children. So they asked Hashem, they prayed, and he had, so after praying, he had children. But on that day that he had the child, noch nafshe, he passed away on that same day. Fortunately, as you know, we're going to do the eulogy for our son, Levi Yitzchak, on this Sunday. He too left a wife who was expecting Mitzvah Hashem very soon, around Pesach time. And he died. He didn't have a chance. He so much wanted to have this child. And even though pregnancy and childbirth was difficult, but he so much wanted it. So, so one of the eulogizers says, Simcha letuga nefcha. The joy turned into, tuga means a mourning. Sosin v'yogin nidbaku. The joy and sorrow connected together because happy with the birth of a child, but he died. He's sighing during the time of his joy. That's when he's sighing. At the time that he was graced, the vlad of the baby was graced with a baby. Avad Chaninai. Chonon, his name was Chonon. Chanina, the one who graced him, was lost. Aviv, Hamechaninai, the father that graced him, was lost on that day. Asikulei Chonon al Shmei. They called him on the name of Chonon to the son. Gemara goes further. Kinoch nafshei de Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan died. That's the second one over here. We have Yochanan. Pascha le Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar. So Rabbi Yitzchak ben Elazar started the eulogy. He says, Kosha Yom Li Yisrael. This day is difficult for the Yidden. Yom Bo HaShemesh Mitzoharayim. Like the day that the sun comes in the afternoon. There is a day sets in the afternoon. There was one particular day when Yoshio, King Yoshio, was a good king, and he was killed by Paranechai, was killed over there. And that is called a day that the sun set in the afternoon. So that's what he was saying on Rabbi Yochanan. The Ksiv, in Amos Periches, it says, V'hoyo b'yoyim ha'hu, it'll be on that day, V'hevesi hashemesh b'tzoharayim. I will bring the sun in the afternoon. The sun will set in the afternoon. V'hevesi hashemesh b'tzoharayim. Dr. Ashkia hashemesh b'tzoharayim. It means that I will set the sun in the afternoon. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Chaim said, what is that pasuk talking about? Ze yoime shel Yeshio. The yoime shel Yeshio, when it says Shemesh B'tzarayim, what is it referring to? The day of Yeshio, Shenera Yeshio, Kori yoime. So he calls that day Yoime shel Yeshio, Shemesh. Kri Yoime Shemesh. Not sure exactly the title written. I'm also, why is the Gemara say 2 times here? I'm wondering. I just want to take a look at the actually text of the Gemara. Is there 2 times? It says it 2 times Rabbi Yochanan. Says Kinoch Nafshe Apostle Rabbi Yitzchak Wolosow Koshin Geba Shamitzaim. Sibishal Gamba Rabbi Yochanan Yom Shoshu Kinoch Nafshe. Oh, right. Okay. No. So there's another. No, that means something else. This just tells us over here. It's mashma. That was the eulogy that we're learning, but now the Gemara says something else. First, the Gemara talks about the eulogy, what they said. And the Gemara tells us another thing. When Rabbi Yochanan died, Yosef Rabbi Ami Shiva V'Shloshim. He sat 7th Shiva. He also said Shloshim. He said after Rabbi Yochanan. So Omar Rabbi Abba Bereid Rabbi Achi Bar Abba. So Rabbi Abba in the name of Rabbi Bar Abba said, Rabbi Ami the Ovid Legarmehu the Ovid. What he did on his own. The Garmez of Klash the Daite. It's not the halacha, you don't see that. The Hochi of Rabbi Bar Abba of Rabbi Yochanan. For so says Rabbi Bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. He says, Afilu Rabbi, Shalim de Chochma, even if it's a teacher that taught him wisdom, Rabbi Shalim de Chochma, Eine Yeshiva Lovel Yirmdecha, you only sit Shiva one day. No Shiva, no Shloshim. So Rabbi Ami sat Shiva Shloshim, that was of his own doing. Kenoch Nafshi de Rab Zera. When Rab Zera died, and so Rashi explains that Rab Zera, he was from Babel. That's where he was born. He was born in Babel. The Kotel Eretz Yisrael, but he grew up in Eretz Yisrael. And Omar, that's why in the eulogy you'll see Eretz Shinar Hora, the Yoda, the land of Shinar, which is Babel, got pregnant and gave birth to Rabbi Zera. But Eretz Tzvi, the land of Tzvi, which is Eretz Yisrael, called the land of the deer, God lo sha'ashueho, that raised its play, meaning the joyful Rabbi Zeras were raised in Eretz Yisrael. And that's what he says Ba'ahochi for this reason, because he grew up in both places. Korile Rabbi Zera, Rav Zera. In Bavel they would say Rab, not Rabbi. In Eretz Yisrael they call Rabbi. Him we call sometimes Rav and sometimes Rabbi because he was in both places. Tosach Allahu Sabdano. So that eulogizer opened up and said, Eretz Shinor Horo V'Yoldo. The land of Babel became pregnant and gave birth. But Eretz Tzvi Godlo Gidlo Sha'usheho. The land of Tzvi, the land of Eretz Yisrael, raised Sha'usheho, her special children, that was Sha'shuim for Babel. Oino lo omro rakas. Woe to hear, says Rakas. Rakas is Tiberius. Ki ovdo Klechem doso. The vessel of desire, Klechem doso, has lost. Oino lo omro rakas. Who is the law? Law looks like that's the Eretz Shinar. Woe to her, says Rakas. So Rashi says, Yechoila Leimer came. She can say so. I don't know what Rashi would say. She can say of the Klechem Dosa because she comes from there. I'm not sure. Leimer came. Rakas Hitveri. Weiter. So the Gemara Kinoch Nafshe de Rababo. When Rababo died, Achitu Amudi de Kisri Mayo. The pillars of Kesari, they were bowling with tears. Achitu, they let down Maya water. So Trashi Achitu Heridud Mos, they were crying. Tears were coming down. When Rabbi Yossi died, Shafu Marzibid Tzipur Doma. The gutters of Tzipris were with blood, as if to say, instead of water, usually in the gutters, there was blood in the gutters because for the blood of Rabbi Yossi again that died. The Rabbi Yaakov, when Rabbi Yaakov died, is Chamimu Koichovi B'imama. The stars were visible in the daytime. Chamimu Koichovi Zok Rashi. Niru HaKeichovim. The Keichovim were visible. So what is, I guess, what's that have to do? That the world is in pain, so that it changed the fact that there all of a sudden there is stars during the daytime. The Rabasi, when Rabasi passed away, Iakru Kol Ilanayim, all trees were uprooted. The Rabbi Chia, when Rabbi Chia passed away, Bichitu Kipi Denura Merikia. Fiery stones landed from the sky. Kipi Denura Zoktrashi. What is Kipi Denura? Avonim Shel Oir. Light stones that light. The Rabbi Nachman Reb Simoi, when he died, Ishtou Tzalmanayu. Ishtou means melted away the crosses, the Tzalmanayu, or the faces. Ishtou Tzalmanayu Zakrash Nemuchu Partzos Shalohem. Their faces were melted down. And they became like Machalatsayu. Rashi says it's like a troll that you paint or that you plaster the wall with a trowel, meaning it flattened out. It's smoothed out. v'nismacha, and it was squished. Cold tziruf parts, cold tzuros, parts of shel tzlomim. All the shapes of the faces of the tzelom, of the images, the tzuras hamadbeyas, and the shapes of the coins, mipnei tzuras hachosid shenishtanes, because the shape of the chosid of Rabbi Menachem was such a righteous, it was changed. Why? Because he died. So they all changed. And Rashi says that Rabbi Menachem was Benon Shel Kedoshim. He was the son of Holy Shaloi Nistakil Ab B'tzura Shel Zurzo. He wouldn't even look at the shape of a coin because it had an image. He didn't want to look at it. Kedamrina B'Arvei Psochim, as we say in Arvei Psochim and Daf Kuf Dalet Amar Aleph. And Rashi, another Rashi, B'Avad the Melchatzayo, and that is K'moisha Huchlaka B'Magal U'B'Mechlatzim. It was smoothed out. Magal means with a roller, U'B'Mechlatzim with a trowel, Shabam Metachim Tita Koisel, with which you plaster the mortar of the wall. When the Rav Tanchum died, the Rav Tanchum Barchia is Katzitzu Kol Andratia, were cut off. All Andratia, those are like images, like they have of the king. They make statues. Andrat is a Tetsuras Hatzlomim, Sha'oisim al Shem HaMelech Shemeis. Those are the shape of the tzelom they make for the king that died. That's the Andratia. The Rabbi Yashiv, when Rabbi Yashiv died, Ichatru Shivin Machtare Berardo. They dug 70 underground tunnels in Nardoa because there were no thieves while he was alive. But once he died, all the thieves came out, so there was another 70. Reminds you of the tunnels. They were digging tunnels over there. Machteres. The Rav Hamnuna, when Rav Hamnuna died, it says, Nechiti kipe debar de Berikia. It fell hail, stones of hail from the sky. Kipi debar de Zaktrashi Avonim, stones. The Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, when they died, Noshu kipi the Brasa Hadodi. The two sides, the domes of the bridges were broken. So they kissed each other, meaning, I guess the two bridges and the two sides fell apart. The Abaye V'Rove, and when Abaye V'Rove died, now Shuk Kipru the Douglas Hadodi. So over there, the two, the domes of the diglos of that. Kinoch Nafshi the Rabbi Misharshia, when Rabbi Misharshia died, Ton Dikle Shitzi. So the palm trees started to take shitzi, which thorns, they became thorn. All right. Let's go a little weiter. Ton Rabbanon. We learned in the Braisa. Chabava with Aleph. Ve'elu kroyim she'ein misachim. The following rips, you're not allowed to sew them together. This is Elu kroyim is be'evel rabosi misachas smachas beites. Hakarei al aviv al imoy, one who rips kriya for his father and mother. Val Rabbi shalim the Torah, and his teacher who taught him Torah. Val Nosi, and on a prince, a leader. Val Bezdin, the head of the court. Val Shmua Sarois, and bad news. Val Birchas Hashem, somebody who blesses Hashem, meaning blasphemous. He uses the opposite language, Birchas Hashem. Val Sefer Torah shenisraf, and a Sefer Torah was burned. Val Ora Yehuda, Val Amigdash, Val Yerushalayim, and for the destruction of the cities of Yehuda, from the Migdash and Yerushalayim. And the way he does it, the Koira al Migdash, you can rip for the Migdash, Shumaisiv al Yerushalayim, doesn't have to make a new one, but he adds for Yerushalayim. Okay, that's the Brais. Friday Gemara now, Avi v'imoy v'raboi Shalimdu Torah Minayim. Where do we know that a father and mother or his teacher that taught him Torah, how do you know you have to render for them? Eksiv, because it
Is
says
it
in
how do you know you
Ochim
need to render,
Beis,
or how do you know you
Beis,
can't?
Pasuk Beis, Elisha sees Elio flying away. And he was screaming, Avi, Avi, my father, father, Rechav Yisrael Paroshav. You are the carriage of Israel and also its riders. So what does the pasuk mean? Avi, Avi is Avi Vima. He considered him like his father and mother. Avi, Avi. To Avi, Avi, father and mother. Rechav Yisrael Paroshav. Zerabai Shalim de Torah. That the carriage of Israel and the riders, the teacher is called that to Torah Torah. My mashma. What is the meaning? What does a rider have to do with teaching Torah? The Matargim Rabbi Yosef, this was translated by Rabbi Yosef. The Rabbi, the Tov Lahain Yisrael B'Tzloisa. Rabbi, he's better for the Yidden than carriages and riders, which means he's more effective with his davening. The Rebbe is more effective than the carriages and the riders. So therefore, he I'll put it in that way. Further, we said that you cannot sew them together. How do you know that? The ksiv, because the pasuk says, "Vaychazir b'godov," held onto the garments, "Vayikorim l'shnayim kroim." You ripped it into two pieces. That's what the pasuk says over there. That's talking about when he took away the kingdom from Shmuel, so he held on and ripped it to two pieces. So he asked him, "Mashma shenema vayikorim." Any Desha for the fact that it says he ripped him. I know it's to two. Why does the pasuk have to say he ripped him into two? Any Desha L'Shnayim. A Malamed Shekaruyim Va'imdim L'Shnayim La'ilom. This teaches us that they were ripped. They will always remain two, which means you can never put them together. That's why there's an extra word Va'yikorim L'Shnayim to tell you L'Shnayim. Okay, let's leave it over here for today. And we'll mamshich. We'll continue. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Good night. I don't know what happened to Stephen today. We'll catch up. Thank you.